Our next madman, who we all adore, happens to be the Poet Laureate of Orange County. Congratulations, sir, and most deserved. Robert Milby as Christopher, as Jared, and Mario and Clayton, and Terrence, and Lou, and Chris, and Ava, and Ted. God bless you all. What an individual voice, transcending time, with the explorations of other proofs of other artists before us to guide us and demonstrate the possibilities. Without further ado, Mr. Milby, if you grace us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hayden. Thank you all for sticking around and staying awake.
Who's awake?
You'll wake up sooner or later. 5th of November, James Elroy Flecker, English poet born 1884. Sam Shepard, American playwright and actor who died recently, although he was born on the 5th of November, 1943. On the 6th, which was Monday, British playwright and poet Thomas Kidd, 1558. The anniversary of the death of Peter Tchaikovsky, 1893. Louis Racine, French poet, 1692. All you Scorpios out there. On the 7th, thank you, sir. Albert Camus, 1913. British poet Ruth Pitter, 1897. And the great Canadian folk singer Joni Mitchell, 1943. The 8th, we have Bram Stoker from Dublin, Ireland, 1847. There were vampires up there. Genevieve Taggart's death in 1948, American poet. The 9th, the great Anne Sexton, 1928, born near Boston, Massachusetts. Dylan Thomas's death at age 39 in 1953. Ivan Turgenev, poet, novelist, playwright, 1818 in Russia. Guillaume Apollinaire's death in 1918, great poet who invented Cubism. Believe it or not, it was a poet. The 10th, which is today, Friedrich von Schiller, 1759, used to hang out with Beethoven. Carl Shapiro, one of our great poets from the World War II era, 1913. Nicholas Vachel Lindsay, born in 1879. He was America's first performance poet. He used to go to tent revival meetings down south with his saxophone and his books. Birthday was today, 1879. And the anniversary of the death of Arthur Rimbaud, 1891, of cancer.
How old was Rimbaud?
He was 36, I think. I don't recall. Yeah. Anne Sexton, who committed suicide at age 46. A curse against elegies. Oh, love, why do we argue like this? I am tired of all of your pious talk. Also, I am tired of all the dead. They refuse to listen. So leave them alone. Take your foot out of the graveyard. They're busy being dead. Everyone was always to blame. The last empty fifth of booze, the rusty nails and chicken feathers that stuck in the mud on the back doorstep, the worms that lived under the cat's ear, and the thin-lipped preacher who refused to call except once on a flea-ridden day when he came scuffing in through the yard looking for a scapegoat. I hid in the kitchen under the rag bag. I refuse to remember the dead, and the dead are bored with the whole thing, but you go ahead. Go on, go back down into the graveyard. Lie down where you think their faces are. Talk back to your old bad dreams. Anne Sexton. All right. Let's see. And Vachel Lindsay. Not Vachel. Some people insist on calling him Vachel. He'd probably clobber you with the saxophone if you did that. Wild Cats. Here, as it were, in the heart of roaring Rome. Here as far as men may get from the soil. Here where political lords are proud of oil, oil in their skins, oil in their robber wells, where money and stone and orations are combined. Here in Washington, D.C., here where sins are refined and over-refined, here where they ape the very walls of Rome, the temples and pillars of imperial Rome, we think of the time the wildcats kept awake our little camp and filled our hearts with fright, when porcupine and bear cubs stirred the brake, and the friendliest wind seemed cold and impolite. We think of our terror through the campfire night, of how we hoped to kiss the earth aright, in spite of fear, and hoped, not all in vain, of how we hoped for wild days, clean with power, of how we sought the fine log cabin hour, of how we thought to rule by leading men to a lone log cabin school. We think of our pioneer American pride, our high defiance that has not yet died, here as it were in the heart of roaring Rome, in Washington, D.C., where they ape the very walls of Rome. Vachel Lindsay, on his birthday.
Is there a date on that poem?
It's from around World War I, right, maybe about 1920. Yep. Right. A few of mine. In this case, a bark is an old word for a ship. Leaf barks in November. November leaves scratch claws across the chalkboard of my roof. They hiss like farm cats under a full moon. Leaves wheeze like old field hands watching a goose autumn sky. Tiny brown boats without sails meander a tempest of winter sadness. No longer can they keep trees warm, tresses on necks and shoulders of summer women at a picnic in the yard. They bragged in October, each claimed friends of glorious harvest. Here in November, they wait lonely pastures, intent on snow for a shawl against loss, endless wandering. All right. This is, I write a lot about academics and how they like to control poetry. A professor cannot be a poet. Professors can never really be poets. They are too busy with their "my door is always open" office hours, polishing their ego metastasis to a high shine. A poor fop or pest residing most of the year in a tax shelter ivory tower, rest in Oz or Wonderland, always proffering or propounding run of abstract, working their iPhone ankle bracelets, teaching their neuroses only to ghosts over smarting phones, about the forbidden fruit laptops where no child shall ever sit, but 4 legs and 4 paws knead the thighs into a subordinate beta member of the furry pack. A professor cannot be a real poet. They wield their Elmer Gantry textbooks, forgetting they are not spell books, unlike grassroots poets who can leave and reemerge beyond the mind of sidereal time. They can be a foe. It does not mean that any writing will not be lauded, published, worshipped in the hawk's nest of that ivory tower, down in the tiny village bookstore, or worse, in a masturbatory dorm room, awash in shrines to that which amounts to a drunk, a lout, an unfaithful spouse, stuck between the legs of the goddess Karma, instead of publishing incantations of healing. For honest syllabi, not ego succubus, the incubus of id, tenure track, lighting the way to truth as a stimulus for the whole, remembering the purpose of reason, not this treason against the soul.
Here, here.
Un más, por favor. All right, this is one more. Yeah. This is about, well, we'll leave it for the look of the Irish.
I got a papers.
Some of you know, yeah, I know you're not. Some of you might know what formalin is. Well, after a long time, funeral home directors, from all the chemicals they put in corpses, they'll get premature Alzheimer's or some kind of type of senility from the chemicals. And formalin is one of the preservatives for corpses, and it has a neurological effect on the nervous system, on the human body.
Also known as formaldehyde.
Correct. They're connected. This takes place in Orange County, New York, and this is about a funeral home director who screwed my mother out of money when burying my father. Flynn's clock. Flynn Flam Funeral Home. The cemetery defies time. The old Victorian house, Flynn's funeral home, once a living home to people, now a corpse repository. A large anachronism mounted just below the roof's eave, daring, beckoning, reminding eventual patrons that death lies within. Death's planned, ostentatious obsolescence, ultimate disrespect of the citizens of my mother's former village. The lace curtains Irish, so-called friend of my mother, so-called director, conducting shams, dreams, regrets, and lies with his wizard cloak of parlor, talk of the trade, draining of blood, draining of funds, dressing corpses for appointments with eternity. 2. The formalin shakes. Flynn thinks he can carry on without reproach. Black maples paint the roof in yellow autumn leaves, covering frost, dressing the morbid house in grandeur towards the end of a dying year. We pay thousands to a stranger to be the last person on earth to touch our parent's body. Alter the appearance, dress father or mother as if the mercurial reaper would care, as if angels and ghosts would not be there. And the clock he mounted to the face of his parents' house would forget that he worked where one pays for funereal chemicals twice. Flynn's large hourglass portends his final minutes as he extends theatrical gimmicks, attempting to stand behind the crime, forgetting that a corpse is not merely a former person, nor a decaying commodity of time. Thank you.